we're super excited. I mean, we've been talking for like 2 months, excited to have this conversation and just, I mean, hey, tell us everything that you're comfortable with. But I think just a brain dump from you is huge because I was laughing with him this morning. I think that you've probably seen more core deals than anybody alive. I mean, I think that's a fair statement. It really is. And so I'd love if you give a little bit of an intro. I mean, it was it 27 years at Fiserv, leading core
31 years at Fiserv, and I spent 11 years at NCR in that division called Data Services. Nobody knew what that was because NCR made cash registers, they made teller machines, they made check sorters, but they had this little division that did outsourcing for banks. And I started in that division, and that thing grew to about 500 to 600 banks that they serviced. But again, it didn't get a lot of love and care because most of the feeding went to the equipment side of business. So they sold that business off to, of all people, Fiserv. So we acquired that business back in the mid-90s at that point in time. So really, I came right out of school. I always say I'm a member of the 21 Club, 2 jobs, 1 wife, right, which is a good club to be in. So I worked for NCR for those 11 years in data centers and was recruited to Fiserv back in the end of 90, went to work for them in 91. The industry has changed significantly, right? We went from talking about what is a now account to, payment methods that are just nobody would ever envision what it would be like. So it really has morphed, and frankly, it's caused a lot of consolidation in the vendor business because then the investments needed, as you guys know, are significant, right? Which has really fed the Fiservs of the world, the FISs of the world, and to a certain extent, the Jack Henrys of the world, because the smaller independents could just not make the investments needed to keep up.
And that was something that, like, just over our careers, I guess, is that there used to be a lot more of them, and the consolidation and the acquisitions.
You guys remember an organization called NABS, National Association of Bank Servicers, right? It's now called something else at this point, but it really was a huge organization, and it was made up of literally dozens and dozens of organizations that did services for banks and credit unions across the country. And that really did consolidate down, as I talked about, as the industry did as well.
Yep. I think we're seeing a good, I think, with capital pullbacks and everything else we'll see, but we've got a lot of young startups that I think are in new areas right now, right? Things that all of us haven't heard of, necessarily. It's not debit cards or core or online banking, a lot of these new companies in new areas that hopefully get established and we've got good funding and we can kind of breathe that next generation in a little bit. But you also have sat for a long time on a bank board.
I still am vice chairman of People's Bank, the Doors Valley Bank. It's about a $2.5 billion bank, a little bit larger holding company. We are right in the middle of an MOE, merger of equals, with another bank, Orstown Bank, which would give us a little over $5 billion. One of the things I think that's become critical is scale, not only in the vendor business, but scale in the banking business as well, right? And this puts us to a point that we can compete a little bit better than we could as an independent bank. I was on the board of a smaller bank, about a $250 million bank, that's acquired by People's Bank. And I tell you an example how tough it is for these smaller community banks to make a living. We had a really bad winter back here in the East, like 2 years before we sold the bank. That made the difference between us making money and not making money for that quarter, snow removal. Wow. So when it's that tight, you have to take a look at strategic options, right? And then the regulators didn't help by saying you need an internal auditor, you need an EP examiner. They came in and put more regs on top of us and more requirements. That it's tough for the community banks. So I have a lot of empathy for them, right? And it's going to continue for at least the foreseeable future. I'm hopeful a different administration may have a different view on getting new charters back in business, to take some of the regulation out of because it's been tough for those wanting to start up and also for capital coming into that market.
Right. Well, we all kind of feel like when they lower interest rates at all, you're going to see stock prices of banks go up, which is going to create mergers everywhere. So
good and bad, right? A lot of pent up demand there. That's tough.
And I think you saw that our transaction was only one of a handful that's happened in 2023, right? So I think to your point, Dave, I think there's a lot of pent up demand out there. And I do think that it's going to continue to be a tough environment, right? So I think in 24 you'll see more transactions. A lot of eyes looking at the couple transactions that happened, but I do think there's some pent up demand out there, and I do think as people are finalizing their budgets and looking at what 24 really looks like, it's going to be a challenge for a lot of them.
I agree. I think you made a great point too, of just how thin the margin is, especially for a smaller institution, and especially as the technology footprint has expanded along with the regulatory, right? Think about the headache of vendor management and the cost there, all that, but you got such a slim margin in the technology costs going through the roof, and just frankly, so much more technology than there was.
Right.
Which kind of brings us to your current world, Brunner, right? You're looking at, hey, if this is the big part of the spend, it's really important to get right, not only from product and contract terms, but from pricing and everything else.
Yeah, when I retired, I joined the advisory board of ICI Consulting. Frankly, I worked with all the consulting firms when I was at Fiserv, and they all have their place. They all do different things. One of the things I found that ICI did is really attack three areas: pricing, contract terms, and then SLAs. And all three of those are critical. The ABA came out with a core banking committee, and the areas they wanted to talk to was open banking, open access. They want to talk about SLAs. They want to talk about contract language, and they want to talk about pricing. So ICI fits in that mold very well, and has signed an agreement with the ICBA, Independent Bankers, to help in that same area. So I do believe that's an area that can help a lot of the organizations. When you look at your cost structures in the banking, they're really, if it's not number two, it's number three, right? From a technology standpoint, and in most banks, it's number two. And it is a point that we can attack and try to help. So I think you'll see more attention to that as well. Fewer banks, and you guys know better than all, a lot of banks used to just let their contracts roll automatically. Vendors loved that. I mean, that was like, nirvana for us, right? Because at that point in time, you got terms that are agreeable to the vendor. You've got pricing that's agreeable to the vendor. By leveling that playing field, and that's where ICI and other consulting firms can help, but at ICI specifically, they bring in expertise that levels that playing field. When I was at Fiserv, we had contract negotiators, we had attorneys, we had procurement people. It just wasn't a fair fight to line up with small community banks.
That is so critical. I'm glad you brought that up, because
it's a tough concept.
You're so overmatched. I mean, even with the representation compared to Fiserv, good luck, right?
Well, I mean,
or Jack Henry or any
vendor out there. I mean, even when we were getting earliest days of Malazai, when there was a dozen of us, I had done hundreds and hundreds more than the most experienced banker I ever talked to, right? And I mean, hey, tack on 30, 40 years to that, and you can imagine, I mean, you got every line of everything, every hundreds of thousands of pages memorized, and just know it all like the back of your hand, and also how to navigate the organization, all the different departments and all the different products that come in. It's not just core on a core contract, right? You got online banking, and we got
exactly,
mobile pay, right?
Just think about it. For that core vendor, most of those core vendors try to accumulate as much technology under their umbrella as possible. So you got the core, you got the channels, you got ATMs, you got the financial applications, payment applications, all under that vendor. The vendors are open to working and negotiating, but if you're not going to push them to that point, they're going to wait for you to take the proactive step. And that's where I think engaging people like ICI can actually really help those banks take that on head on and level that playing field.
We'd looked for the right partner on all that for a long time. And, it's a different game.
Yeah. I mean, we're super thrilled to have ICI as a BHB sponsor. And I mean, I can tell you, we've already been able not only to utilize you guys, but selfishly with our team to learn a lot, right?
Yep.
I mean, I know I sound like an ass, right? But I don't hop on every call expecting to just learn like crazy, and I'm in there scribbling notes, man.
Right.
Yeah. And you think about why ICI excels is they've hired from the vendors. The guy that used to be CFO of the banking solution for Fiserv now works for them. The CFO for our payment side and the check side now works for them. A lot of the account management. We've also hired from FIS, from Jack Henry. So they'll have those people that know what pricing should be and know what SLAs should be. So they bring those level of expertise, which is why working with Bankers Helping Banker is really a great fit for the organizations. And you guys deserve a lot of credit for that, right? Bringing the bankers together with technology vendors, because frankly, that's not easy to do, right? And being able to channel that trust of the vendors as well as the bankers is really kind of unique. And You guys done a lot of that. Your whole initiative around BASS, right? Your banking as a software service. You guys do a great job of that, helping new companies that want to start up in this industry. Because I do think, as you said earlier, Tanner, Dave, is that you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more startup organizations, right? If we can align those with the proper, again, open systems to be able to integrate back in the core and not lock them out, I think you'll see a lot of abilities brought to the community bank environment that's not there today. Community banks don't have the budgets that B of A and Chase and those folks have, right? But you can bring new technology, emerging technology in at a cost-effective price point and have it integrated to the back-end cores. I think that's going to be a plus. And I see all the vendors now starting to open up their back ends. Not always happily, but really opening up their back ends to this integration. And I think you'll continue to see that. And I think people like the ICBA and ABA are helping force that issue. And people like yourselves, right? I mean, you guys do a great job of telling what's out there and what to expect. And again, I had the opportunity to attend your roundup. What a great venue, right? What a great venue. You had bankers, you had vendors there, casual conversations, interaction. What should this look like? What's that look like? I mean, that just doesn't happen at a lot of opportunities, right? So again, you guys deserve a lot of credit for bringing those together.
Appreciate it.
Really.
You know, the whole thing with bankers helping bankers is we're trying to fill the holes that are in the marketplace that others are not. We're not trying to compete with anybody. We're just trying to say, gosh, they need help on this. We can find the right people for that. And, you know, this matchmaking of technology and banking and all that is great. And, you know, to your point earlier, I think the old statistic we all run off of was like an average banker goes through like 2 core conversions in his whole life. Mm-hmm. And you go through like 25 a day, right? So a little bit mismatched there. Yeah. The other thing that I think is really interesting with all this is there's a changing of this, the technology speed of change has increased and the velocity of it. And I don't think anybody is an expert anymore at everything.
And the footprint has expanded.
Which opens this new opportunity that we, you know, kind of tapped into as well. Like you, this is wonderful conversation, by the way. You got Mr. Fiserv that was on a bank board and, you know, acquisitions. You've seen it all, man. And this is something that is missing in the marketplace. I've got people that are like, hey, I sit on a bank board. I'm a badass. Don't really want to betray that bank and be on multiple bank boards. Don't think that's fair, but I could damn sure help a fintech. Okay, cool. Got off a call this morning with somebody. We're looking through everything. I don't think they'd ever heard of UDAP. So there's this, you know, dichotomy going on in the marketplace and lack of leadership. And so you've got bank boards that desperately need technology experts like yourself on those boards. And then you've got technology people that need banking experience in those boards. And us being able to make that together.
A lot of that going on.
He calls it match.com.
I call bankers helping bankers, and you guys have done that, right? I mean, you guys have exposed those bankers. It's amazing at the roundup how many of those bankers were talking fintech language, right? I mean, it was really amazing. And most of those guys that were doing that had been to the roundup 2-3 times, right? It wasn't the first timers there. So I think your point's valid. As I sit on our board, I mean, the level of technology expertise is minimal, especially in the banking space, right? And I think that's a commonality among all bank boards, right? So I think getting them exposed, whether it's through bankers helping bankers, whether it's getting more technology on their boards, are going to be helpful. So I do think that's going to be a critical piece going forward, is making sure that banks understand the technology. Look what's coming down the pipe, AI. Right? If we're not careful, AI is going to run over, not just help, but it'll run over a lot of banks. And again, if the big banks deploy this effectively and the smaller community banks don't, it's going to be problematic, right? Especially from a cost structure standpoint and a product service standpoint. So I think it's more important than ever we align the emerging vendors, emerging technologies with the bankers and expose that to the community banks, right? The bigger banks got budget to go out and do this on their own, to hire a lot of people. The community banks, and that's a vibrant thing for every market I see. Those that have a community bank have a better presence, right? They have people who are donating to their youth programs, they have people involved in the community, have people helping the local builders. Those people that lose that community bank, they lose a big part of the community. So that's why I thought it was critical when we were opening new banks. Right. And I think we need to continue to get back in and look at that. Capital has become an issue. I think capital will ease up, so we may see more capital flowing into that. But I do think community banking is something that we cannot afford to lose in this country.
I couldn't agree more. I scream it every day, and I can't wait till we get big enough to have a Super Bowl commercial. That's all I
Well,
know.
hopefully the Ravens will be playing in that Super Bowl.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's not kidding me. And I bet for 10 years he's talked to me about one day we're going to be able to run a community banking Super Bowl commercial. You know,
I want to do it.
Yeah.
That would be something to
We've been
see.
talking about community banking and the future of America. But yeah, one of the other things you hit on was AI, and I think there's a positive there, and I think there's also a I'm going to say risk.
I was going to say
fraud.
risk.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's areas of. I mean, hell, people can impersonate your wife on the telephone. It's like
Exactly right.
Even into things like CRA risk.
Right. And I think one of the roles that we can help with a lot on that is by being tech experts, it kind of allows everybody. Most of this stuff is kind of like magic. They don't really know how it works. And so when you understand how these things get done, okay, this is an area that you need to protect. This is an area bankers really just don't even know what, where the arrow is coming from. Right. And so I think some of those little things along the way will be beneficial.
And Dave, you hit the point. Excuse me, Tanner. You hit the point. Is that every bank has a risk management committee, right? I bet you very few, if any, have asked that. What are the risks AI presents to our bank? And it better be a conversation that all banks start to have, because you're right. I mean, people are calling up with AI chat, sounding just like the daughter or the son asking for money. Right, you have every call center.
My mom calls me on the phone like, "What?
What?"
Yeah.
Right.
You have every call center and every bank's going to be faced with those type of challenges. So it is something that they get to get a hold of.
Not just the opportunity of AI, but the risk of AI. And there's a balance that we need to pay attention to.
I mean, we're looking at that across the board. And I think we hit this really well earlier. The idea of this over years, there's so much more technology and it's expanded. I mean, each new thing is that, right? Can you imagine the guys sitting around there like, ATMs? Are you freaking crazy? Do you know what could happen here? Right? We've been through this, I mean, it's just more of it and going faster. But it's something I was thinking about, Brunner. If you thought about what we used to joke, there was about 750 banks each year up for contract renewal. And you and I used to laugh about how come only 100 or so change, right? And everybody else is looking or tire kicking, and I mean, the old adage of every bank hits their core, they're fired up to change, right? But I mean, 1 out of every 8 actually does or less, you get, 2% annual churn in bank core, right? I mean, it's pretty high. I've always thought about what I call conversion pain. So it's not just a core conversion. I got to change online banking or bill pay or, before you know it, I've got duplicates flying out of my ears and my item processing is all screwed up. It's a big, big block. And I think you got to watch over years, and I've seen the tail end of it, but got to watch what was core expand into a much bigger story that now is one hell of a lift.
Absolutely.
Is that what you think the biggest reason to why more core conversions don't happen is just the pain?
Absolutely. And Tanner, you hit the nail on the head, because it used to be the Big Bang Theory, right? I had to take everything, right? And core vendors did a great job of getting everything, the ATM, the check processing, the channel processing, all my web-based services, all that was under one umbrella. So when I say I want to change my back end of Fiserv to Jack Henry, FIS to CSI, whoever it may be, right? What that meant is I'm not just changing my core processing. I'm changing everything that touches every client, that touches every employee, right? That can turn me into the newspapers, right? Front page newspaper article in my local community where I don't want to be. You have CEOs walk into the retail stores and say, "Hey, I was trying to get my money out. I couldn't get it out today." Nobody wants that kind of publicity, right? I think one thing that you've talked about is how we evolve. We can go from a revolution of taking everything at once to evolving to convert to channels, convert to ATMs, then convert to core. Do it in a piecemeal approach. That'll help lessen the burden, because it actually frees up the bank's personnel as well to say, okay, these channel people are involved this week and next week, and I got here. And as you know, a lot of community bankers wear multiple hats. So the more you can slice and dice this out, the better it'll be, right? Because it won't be that one big weekend event. And that's why, Tanner, to your point, people avoided that.
This is
I love
funny. This is
Can
so
we
well
clone
said.
this guy? He's
Oh, it's perfect.
fantastic.
I think about
Yeah.
this a lot. I had, I love, for some reason, I just love gardening, man. I'm growing onions. I got tomatoes. I'm canning salsa. I don't know. It's my stress thing, man. That's what I do for fun. And
We cut up 800 million jalapenos.
oh
the
yeah,
other day.
yeah. I'm up there playing all the time. But I've always thought of this as I had one. This is years ago. We had a crazy year, and I had my fall garden. I just had to let it go, and it got all overgrown and crazy. And I had to do like a garden conversion, right? An overhaul. Versus normally, right? You're working a little section. It's this time of year, and I'm pulling green beans out, and I'm putting in onions or whatever it is. And if you go piece by piece, the thing works really nicely as an ecosystem, and you keep it seasonally clean, right?
Yeah.
And
When
and
he
you're
calls for help, it scares the hell out of me. Bring your gloves. It's going to be a tough day.
yeah, I mean, we probably eat half of our food comes out of the garden, So, but it's a good way to think about it in terms of if we're constantly spending a little bit of time and effort on it, we get things fairly clean and we can manage a lot. And I think banks have more of that mindset. And it's probably an older mindset that worked better years ago. Let's get something done. Let's do a project, right?
Yep.
And we'll come back in 5 years and reevaluate. And I think just a shifting mindset of if we just put a little daily effort into this,
Right.
we can do one thing at a time, to your point.
Think about it. Most banks go through their strategic planning. They come up with 10 to 15 strategic items and projects they want to accomplish in the coming year.
Yeah.
You put a core conversion on top of that, all those strategic plans go out the window, right? And all good intentions of getting those 10 or 12 done doesn't happen. So to your point, if I can do some hygiene and take care of this in a piecemeal approach, and then get to the core itself in the back end, that's a heck of a way to approach it, and much more manageable. And it doesn't consume the executive management of the bank, because otherwise they're consumed with this, and all strategic planning goes out the door.
Yeah, this is something so cool. I want everybody to really catch this because we talk about like an order of events.
Right.
It's not
little LIFO and FIFO.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that people just look at in the aggregate and they try to swallow that pill. And it's like, if you handle this thing in this particular order, you can unravel some of these things to your advantage in a permanent way.
That is
also
so well
makes
said.
everything else that you're trying to do, to your point, more digestible. And we got economic cycles all over the place. We've got, communities that are hot and cold and all these different things that are happening. We've got outside forces like FinTech and all this other stuff. And it's like so much for a board level or senior level banker to consume, and try to fight back. Sometimes if I'm trying to work my jab or the hook, to break these things down in a way, in an order of events of operationally attacking these things, and then banking becomes fun again.
There's interoperability in there too, Brunner, right? That we've got, from a core mentality of the larger cores, especially just acquiring for so many years, eventually you want to get to a place where your products work well with your products and your ecosystem, but not so well outside, right? And so there's an interoperability issue at a lot of banks we run into where I'm like, you're going to have to change almost everything you have if you change your core, because those are products that are really consumed by that core, right? And not meant for outside. So to your point, if you begin to part and piece out more from the bottom up, let's change our online banking as an example. That'd be literally almost half the battle, right? There's so much tied to it. So I think
about it, Tanner, those vendors, they've done core data conversions, right? They've moved their data from Jack Henry to FIS, from FIS to Fiserv to Jack Henry. Those guys know how to move that data. It's the other pieces that come into that, the operability of your internet banking, of your business banking, of your ATM, of your payments, of your checking, right? So to your guys' point, if I can start attacking those a little bit separately, that back-end data conversion will happen because the vendors do that pretty cleanly. It's all the other stuff that has to go on top of it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I've said this for years. I know Tanner beat the drum on this forever. The vendors in most cases, and especially the ones that we work with, they know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
The consultants or the other parties involved would get the hell out of the way. They're interested in doing this in the most expeditious, fast way. They don't make money till they get this thing rolling. And if they create 50 other problems along the way, that's not good for them. So they become efficient in these things. allow them to do what they do.
To your point, though, sometimes almost too efficient. I mean, we look at banking, especially in community banking, and you'd have to argue that some of the vendor community, as I mean, all of us somewhat guilty, just got too damn efficient, right? And everything became a little too in the box, right? And too scaled. And so whether we're talking pricing or contract terms, or we're talking, you know, data and product, it's not the most customizable and it doesn't necessarily fit you perfectly.
And that the term you use, Tanner, is a key term because we see it all the time. Bank in a box, right? Well, bank in a box sometimes a good thing. Bank in a box is sometimes a bad thing. Depends on the bank you're dealing with, right? Some bankers want to say, take all this and take care of it. Other bankers say, hey, I want to be open. I want to go use best of breed solutions. I want to do this. Or I want to do that. And I think that's where we're evolving to now. I think the bank in a box is starting to change. And I think a lot of the new platforms that are coming in, right? Some of the new fourth generation language products, FinTech, Cowboys, and a few others. Those guys are coming in and saying, we've got a great back end here. And we've got the technology to allow you to connect to other technologies that aren't domain to your core vendor, right? They can be, but they don't have to be. Right. So I think that'll help this whole evolution process as well.
To speak to your point, I know you and I for years have looked at this, but we always kind of looked at that as the 80-20 rule of banks that buy the bundle, about 80%. We peaked out at about 82, 83%. And that number has finally started to come back down just a little bit. So I think it was 76% I tracked this year. So 76% of the banks buying the bundle. But that number is actually on its way down slowly, just a little bit. But it points to you, I think things like Sidecar Core is a great example. Yeah. The BaaS space, and then banks that are doing a direct digital only brand or a niche bank, right? Things like that. It's given everybody a little bit of a different perspective of, as I'm starting a new strategic initiative, why don't I start with new technology? And if it goes well, maybe that eats some of my old stuff.
That's the flexibility.
And Tanner, that's a great point, because what you see now is a lot of, especially larger banks, right? When they want to take a look, their back end systems are huge, right? Swapping those out is like heart and lung transplant surgery.
Yeah,
it's going to be tough. What they've done is they've put together this new technology, put a sidecar out there, right? And with the sidecar, they can reinvent what they're doing with their domain technology and evolve that into the core itself. Right. And I think that's what you're going to see. And that's why you've seen some bigger banks make some significant investments in some of this new technology, because then doing a straight core conversion for a bank of any size is a tough task. Do it for a big bank, a really big top 25 bank, is almost impossible. Right. And we've seen a lot of big banks try it. A lot of big banks have budgets that got blown, timelines that got blown. By putting that sidecar out there and working with that technology, understanding that technology, look at the integration points that I have to go into, it'll make that process a lot easier. We'll see a lot more banks start to adopt that kind of strategy.
That's perfect. It's like special team, right?
Okay, I would tell you this. If I was a banker running my bank, I would never in my entire career ever do a conversion, no matter what. Yeah. Because I've done so many that I know, I mean, hey, we got the best people, and occasionally somebody still gets blown up. It's Russian roulette. It's a minefield, right? And so I look at it like I would figure out how to relegate the need for the thing and turn it off. How do I move my own people to something else to where I can turn the thing off, not conversion? You flip that switch, buddy, and you're taking your life in your hands.
I'll tell you what, for again, anybody watching this thing, can you imagine what it's like hanging out with these two guys having a beer one night? Sit there and eat popcorn and listen and have a blast, right? That's the way I've always felt about hanging out with you two,
with you guys,
and Brent included, you know. But it's
you guys are very fortunate though, because I mean, you guys feed off each other very well. I mean, family is great. You guys have taken that and really exploded it to the benefit of a lot of bankers, and your personality allows you to interact in a non-threatening mode with banks as well as vendors, right? And you've built trust, frankly, in the vendor community and in the banking community. And that's rare to be able to build that trust. And I think it's the personality you guys bring together individually. Individually, you'd be this or you'd be that. Together,
I'm a person.
Together, you're FIS. I mean, together, you're Fed FIS. I mean, so it really does make a difference.
Yeah, we got friends that hang out with us.
Really appreciate that.
When you two get to talking, it's like half sentences. And I'm like, well, it's because we're like mind melding.
Yeah,
right?
we're
You
we're
can almost
terrible.
finish each other's sentences, which is kind of scary.
Yes, we're worthless separately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I appreciate it. Hey, I want to give you a quick final thoughts, anything at all that's going on, whatever's on your mind. Could be a fishing trip, could be core conversions. Just take a couple of minutes, man. Anything at all you want to mention or talk about, you shoot.
You know, when I retired, I wondered what I was going to do. I joined, stayed active on the board of the bank, been active on ICI's board, and then I had this little grandson that's 2 years old. This just has changed my life entirely, right? And Dave, you're starting to understand that
Pictures of him all the time.
Don't even let me bring my phone out because you won't get off of it, right? And now he's 2 years old, so he's got a little personality now. So it's been just a lot of fun. And I've made a lot of friends like yourselves over the years, and I've had an opportunity to go fishing with a lot of my buddies. I was just down in Texas fishing, down in Texas, Louisiana for redfish. I've been up to North Dakota fishing. I have a good friend down at Florida. We go fishing. So I've got a lot of opportunity to fish. But that little grandson is kind of special as well, guys.
That is so cool, man. I'm just so happy to hear it. You know, I know all of us, anybody watching, we have those tough days or tough weeks, or you're on an airport somewhere and you miss a flight and a birthday party on a Saturday, and we all do those things. And being able to take the time, especially playing with the little ones, it's super rewarding, man. I'm happy for you.
Again, guys, I'll say it. You guys do a lot of good things out there, especially for the community banks, right? And what you're doing really makes a difference, right? And I know a lot of people don't have an opportunity to thank you for that. But from a vendor standpoint, from a banker standpoint, keep it up, because you guys are making a difference and you're making it possible for a lot of community banks to survive.
Man, I appreciate that very, very much.
We try hard.
All right, guys. I enjoy it. When he said I'm getting back down to the ranch.
All right, come on, man. We'll see
need
you
to
soon.
take him on that hunting fishing thing that we got going on. Yeah.
There you go. We're lining one up. Don't worry.
All right, man. Hey, guys. Take
Enjoy
care.
it. Thank you.
See ya.
Good talking to you.